texture, she might not read it. I prefer not texting.
I polish.
Because not writing those things.
She's like 2 minutes away. Okay. She's 20 minutes away.
Along the street. You can't, it's broken.
What's that? Well, it was a false alarm if it was supposed to be the rental company. No, I'm still waiting for the rental company.
How many attorneys is it this
I'll tell you the story about how many attorneys it takes to get glasses back from Mexico. Great. More than there are. You're on? Excellent. Oh my goodness.
Start the meeting after your public comments.
Call this special meeting of the Board of Directors for DSRSD to order. Please stand for the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Leopold. Here. Director Benson. Director Halgett.
Here.
President Duarte.
Here. The item on the agenda, first, item number 4, public comment. At this time, if there's anyone in the audience they're encouraged to address the board on any item of interest that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and not already included on tonight's agenda. Do we have any wishes to speak? Seeing none. I think we'll move on to board business. Board business item 5A, long-term alternative water supplies study workshop, presented by Dan.
Good evening, President Duarte and directors. Earlier this year, the board authorized the long-term alternative water supply study for the district. The purpose was to provide information necessary for the board to develop some water policies which will have an impact on the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan, the district's position on Delta Fix issues, and the decision on any Zone 7 water supply contract amendments and extensions in the future. Additionally, this alternative water supply study provides information to inform the district prior to expressing any policy preferences on Tri-Valley regional water supply and conservation issues. The study is a first planning step in developing and encouraging a more diversified water supply portfolio for the district, and as such is a hedge against many Delta uncertainties. Moreover, it is the foundation for development of possible capital projects and preliminary environmental review. The information in this study is information for the district, and as such focuses on policies and programs applicable to the district. It may be possible for some of these ideas to be implemented as collaborative projects or programs in the Tri-Valley, but this first initial study focuses solely on the district's long-term needs. An initial workshop was held in February, and a tentative water policy framework was suggested along with initial water supply and conservation concepts. Staff and consultant RMC are returning tonight to review tentative policy principles and to present the findings of this study in a workshop format. We have tonight Project Manager Rodora Biacton and consultants from RMC Randy Rains and Terry Delvaccio to make a presentation.
Well, good evening. It's nice to be here, and thank you for spending time with us, talking about some of the findings that we've developed through this study. We've actually, since the last workshop, we spent a lot of time looking high and low for water, and we've talked to a lot of the neighboring agencies. We've spent time talking to San Francisco Public Utility Commission, East Bay Mud, Alameda County Water District, Contra Costa Water District, and of course, your local partners on 7, City of Pleasanton, and City of Livermore. So we've talked with a lot of different agencies about their thoughts about the water supply situation now and where long-term there might be alternative supplies for improved reliability. And basically, we've gone through that information and gone through a little bit of a screening process to come back tonight with some ideas, and that's what we're going to present in these slides. So, to start with a brief background, going over a couple of things we talked about last time. Again, repeating the demand projections from a long-term perspective. These are right out of the Urban Water Management Plan. The alternative water supply options considered, and then the screened options that we're recommending be considered even further, and then looking at how those ideas and those water supplies might fit into a policy framework for your agency. And a presentation of what we've come up with as possibly an alternative water supply portfolio, looking at various options combined together to meet your entire demand on a long-term basis. So since the last time we met on February 17th, these are a few headlines I just took out of various sources. Well, of course, February, we'd already seen the record in January with absolutely no water and no rainfall. The fact that the amount of rainfall, or the small amount of rainfall we have received this year has been it's been through very warm storms, and there's basically no snow in the mountains, and there hasn't been for some time. And then, of course, we all know about the mandatory water restrictions and so on. So the purpose of the study, just to remind you, first of all, to conduct a high-level assessment of the long-term options for the water supply. Develop a framework, and we started talking about what a framework might look like at the last meeting with various goals for various elements of your water supply situation. Identify some of the next steps that you might take to improve water supply and reliability. And then ultimately this will provide information for your next update of the urban water management plan. There you go. Okay, these are the topics that we presented last time that would basically set the stage for a framework from a policy standpoint. And they included reducing demand, meeting a certain conservation level on a long-term basis, increasing water reuse. Of course, you're already kind of setting a very good example for the rest of California with respect to water reuse, but we're looking at using every drop of water possible, even in the off-summer months. So we'll be talking about that. Decreasing basically the variability with respect to water supply. Reducing the dependence on imported supplies, basically taking this down to a point where the concentration of supply is not all from the state water project or something of that nature. So basically the overall diversification of supply. So these are the demand projections for DSRSD right out of the 2010 Urban Water Management Plan. And what we're showing are the total demands, both the potable and the recycled water. And you can see by about 2025, they grow to a total of about 25,000 acre-feet per year, based upon the last Urban Water Management Plan. We expect they're going to go down a little bit, or they're going to go down somewhat, because of all the conservation that's been occurring since that time. But we'll see where those numbers end up in 2015. Taking a look at the valley as a whole, the column on the left presents the total water supply for the Zone 7 water agency, and as you can see, it's dominated by the State Water Project, which we're all very aware is now being cut back considerably. And of course, DSRSD supply is predominantly from Zone 7, with a small amount from local groundwater supplies that you have access to and rights to. This is the potable supply here, not the recycled water portion of the supply. So we've looked at a whole list of water supply options, and this is the list that we went over last time. Non-potable recycled water, again, you're doing a whole lot with respect to non-potable recycled water with the partnership with East Bay Mud and now your partnership with the City of Pleasanton. But we're looking at here possibly storing some of the water that is available through the winter and maybe finding a place for that in the summertime, or doing some alternative type projects to really maximize the non-potable supply of recycled water. Looking at indirect and direct potable use, basically the idea where you would treat recycled water to a very high level and provide it for possible groundwater recharge, or put it in local reservoirs as a supply augmentation for those supplies. The fringe basin has a certain amount of supply available, not very much, as we will see, or we'll basically touch on that in a minute. District-wide stormwater program, again, direct potable reuse, regional desalination, transfers and exchanges, and further demand management above and beyond the conservation that you're already employing. So these are our recommendations going through this list. Basically, we're convinced that there is a possibility for extension of the non-potable reuse program of some nature. Indirect potable reuse seems to rise to the top as an option that does make a lot of sense to basically augment the flow that's going into the groundwater basin, or the recharge now going into the groundwater basin primarily from imported water from the state water project. The fringe basin doesn't really look like it's going to provide much supply. The amount of water there is limited and the quality is very poor, but it could provide a little bit more water for the non-potable, like the recycled water used for irrigation and that type of thing. District-wide stormwater, we're not recommending them go forward with that. Primarily the stormwater is managed in the valley by the Zone 7 system, and there is a need for a certain amount of water to flow down out of the creek to meet some of the requirements set in place for water supply downstream. So it doesn't look like that's a great idea. There's probably a limited amount of potential just on a local neighborhood by neighborhood basis, but we didn't take it further in this analysis. Direct potable reuse, we think should be on the table. It's being talked about a lot by a lot of the agencies in California now, including the City of San Diego, the City of LA, even the City of San Francisco is talking about it. We're not recommending going forward too fast on that, though, because the regulations for direct potable reuse are not in place, and we expect those will come into place in the next couple of years. Regional desalination, there is a project being looked at in the Delta, basically up by the Pittsburgh, Antioch area, and it's a project where there's a lot of agencies already involved in a partnership looking at that. We kind of went beyond that and looked at a source of water right over the hill in the Hayward area. And you'll see in a little bit, we're talking about a possible desal project in that area. Transfers and exchanges. This would take water from likely north of the Delta and transfer it through some pipe mechanism getting into your agency. One logical approach would be to take that through the Freeport system that's operated by East Bay Mud and have the water basically pumped out of the Sacramento River system upstream of the Delta and then routed back through the McCoy and the Aqueduct to the Bay Area. And then finally, demand management, again, we're thinking that that's going to make sense from some perspectives. We'll be talking about the elements of that here in a second. So are there any questions on this list or other thoughts about what's left off the list? Or okay.
I actually have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Not on this list, but back in the presentation.
Okay.
Okay, this particular one, it doesn't seem as if you projected enough of recycled water given the growth. I mean, the growth, I just happened to be at a city meeting last night. It's expected in the city alone to get to 76,000, and right now we're at 50 if you count the jail. In the next 10 years. So it seems to me there's not enough analysis, not enough projection for recycled water. Can you give me your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm going to let Redora answer that question. She prepared the urban water management plan, I think, in 2010.
So these projections were from the 2010 urban development plan. That was the basis that we used to develop this study. We know that there are more developments, and we've received some variances from the state board that would allow us to increase how much recycled water we can put. And we're going to be going into 2015 with the water management plan, and that's when we'll see further how much more recycled water. So this is just for illustration for the concepts that we are looking at.
Okay. And then the next slide, where it shows we have groundwater, I thought we had leased everything out. We don't have any wells, do we, anymore?
I'm going to let her answer that
We
question.
have a groundwater pumping quota of 654 acre feet that under contract is almost pumps for us.
Okay.
So we actually received that water. If you're right, back in the day, we actually had exchanged that groundwater pumping quota out of California water for about 5 or 6 years running. But then we took that back on our own water supply. But that water is pumped for us at the well that, at the Zone 7 well that's built on the DSRSD Camp Parks property down on Stone Ridge and
Yeah, read it. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Gary is going to talk about basically an analysis of these various ideas and how we kind of squeeze them down to more specific examples or options.
Yeah, so as Randy mentioned, from the list of water supply options that we had looked through, there was 4 primary options that moved forward into our more detailed analysis. One of these is about reducing demand, the other 3 are about creating new supply, so it's a little bit of mix and match. So option 1 is looking at demand management, and we kind of classify this into 4 different strategies: doing enhanced conservation, bringing recycled water direct to residential customers, like front yard irrigation, rainwater capture at a household level or a business level, and gray water also at a household or business level. Combined, we find that these strategies could reduce demand. We're estimating around 660 acre feet per year, which is about a 2.5% reduction on the assumed 25,000 acre feet of 2025 demand. So these strategies alone are not going to meet supply. And I think that's intuitive. But we think that pairing these strategies with other options might help reduce demand and meet supply overall. And so we'll go into each of these a little bit in more detail. So for enhanced conservation, we took a look at what has happened between May and December of 2014 in terms of rebates for low flush or low flow toilets, faucets, things like that. 477 rebates have been given out at a total cost of $16,000. So we made an assumption that if you processed 4 times as many rebates going forward, what kind of additional water savings could you get by 2025? And that adds up to about 70 acre feet. And on a cost per acre foot basis, that's around $700 an acre foot, which is a reasonable investment. Yes.
I notice you don't have the Y after acre feet. Is it still per year?
Yes. Option 2, looking at bringing recycled water direct to customers' homes. We looked at this from 2 different perspectives. If you look at this as a retrofit situation, we assumed you could hook up 50 homes that are near your existing recycled water main lines and irrigate front yards with recycled water. There would need to be retrofits done in order to put in a recycled water meter to those front yards. There's not a huge amount of use when you do 50 homes like that, so it's 5 acre feet per year at a cost of $300,000 per house. So maybe a little costly on a per home basis. But if you look,
About 5,000 per house, about 300,000 overall is what
yeah, 5,000. Yeah, so that assumes $5,000 to cut open the street, put in a lateral, hook up a meter, which is might even be on the low end of what the cost would be. But if you're putting that in at the time of new development, and we made an assumption that you, through some kind of arrangement or requirement, have 25% of your new connections hook up to recycled water for front yard irrigation, this would end up being around 200 acre feet per year in potable water offset, and could potentially, if put in at the time of development, come at a cost of $0 to you. We looked at rainwater and gray water in a similar capacity. Looking at it in terms of retrofits, we made an assumption that you get 3% of residential connections to install either a rain barrel at their own home, rainwater cistern, for example, or some kind of gray water system at their home. 55 acre-feet of potable offset. If you look at it from the cost of a rain barrel, for example, assuming a $500 rain barrel, and DSRSD providing a rebate on that rain barrel, the program cost would be around $200,000, and the per acre foot cost around $3,400. Also, per $3,400 acre foot per year cost. That also assumes that it rains, so there's rain to capture in the rainwater barrel. But if you look at this from a new development perspective, in this case, since you wouldn't need the recycled water main running in front of the house, this is something you could require developments in different portions of the city or service area to do. We assume 75% of new connections would install either a rain barrel or a gray water system. You get 390 acre feet of estimated potable water offset, and again, it put in at the time of development potentially at a cost of $0 to DSRSD. So combining those options together from the demand management perspective, this is how we get to our 660 acre feet of reduced demand off of the 25,000 acre feet of 2025 estimated demand through the enhanced rebates, through recycled water direct to customers, and rainwater, gray water to new residents. Reliability could be up to 100%, although it is dependent on things like precipitation with a rain barrel or customer compliance. If you have them put in, you pay for a low flush toilet, and they switch it out on you. There's customer compliance issues with some of the conservation measures. But we're estimating the cost around $700 an acre foot for the enhanced rebates, and we're assuming zero cost for new development strategies. Any questions on option one? It's a lot.
I'll turn to John. The zero cost for, even if it goes into a new neighborhood, we either put the pipe in or they put the pipe in and we're paying for it.
But the new neighborhoods.
No, not in neighborhoods. That's dedicated, donated public improvements to the district. There's only a reimbursement for oversizing of major infrastructure, not typically the case for most recycled water.
Even if, so we've got the backbone all the way in, there's not going to be any more oversized pipes?
And, yeah, dedicated to the district.
There.
What would happen there, though, is we're expanding our recycled water facilities that we operate ultimately, so that goes into capital management at some point in the future. That's something that we have to think about replacing. So that's kind of more in the long run. We're adding more pipelines to what we're.
Yeah,
So there's still some costs, just wherever we categorize that cost.
It's not zero.
It's not.
Nothing comes for
Nothing's
free.
free.
That's,
Somewhere between $0 and $300,000. Any other questions on demand management?
and for the gray water, so are there any new neighborhoods planned in places where we're not going to be able to get recycled water to them upon?
Well, there's always going to be pockets of neighborhoods where the developer might decide that extending recycled water that far out is not tapped out for them. And so, unless we make an ordinance, our current code says that single-family residential homes are exempt from connecting to recycled water. And we'll have to make some changes to that ordinance code in order for us to make it mandatory for them to connect to recycled water.
How far up Tasahara do we go now?
We are currently at Tasahara South, that intersection. Moeller Ranch is moving forward, and they will be extending recycled water towards their property. So they're going to go up to almost the county line.
Really? The Shed property and Shaper Ranch, and not Shaper Ranch.
Shaper Ranch is on the other side. There's
Wallace Ranch.
Wallace Ranch is also extending recycled water into their development. And so they'll be connecting to recycled water. They says if they can connect to single-family homes where they get to recycled water.
what we said.
So the good news is, I don't know if I can share that, but a couple of weeks ago, we received variance from the state board allowing us to provide recycled water in front lawns of new single-family homes with, because the front lawns are controlled by homeowners association. And and they don't have to install a backflow preventer because essentially the design is to be able to foolproof so that if somebody's going to try to tie something into the potable water system, they'll have to break their own driveway. So, so it's looking pretty good, and we have a lot of developers that want to connect to recycled water for single-family homes. So we're discussing this, and so that just increases the demands for recycled water. It's a recent development, so I don't even have projections for what that looks like in the future.
And where I was angling with is, by the time we get all the variances and get our ducks in a row, how many of these developments are going to be in, and then they become retrofits versus new construction.
They're going to do it now.
And so,
Yeah.
race,
I think we're going to take the approach like we did.
ask forgiveness.
Yeah, with pipes.
Well, they're volunteering, we're not making it mandatory, they're volunteering, so we'll work with them.
Maybe we're not too far to looking at man. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Which developments are you talking about? The ones that are just starting or the ones that are still on
The
paper?
ones that are just starting and the ones that are on paper, like neighborhoods in Georgian Ranch, Wallace Ranch, Miller Ranch, those are the ones that have their interest that really built when we share that information.
And the developers that are anxious or
Oh,
eager
yeah.
to sign up for it, are they asking for any variances from us for
No,
as far
they're
as
not asking for
possible?
any variances.
They're just willing to do it.
The only,
I mean, it's good, it makes
Yeah,
sense
but-
for them, but
yeah, the only thing that they were hesitant about is the installation of a backflow preventer, but because of the change in the design, they were able to get around that requirement.
yeah.
And the regulatory agencies are happy.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. Very good.
At this point in time, no public agency is going to want to oppose that, and they shouldn't be anyway.
So I'll let Carrie continue.
I have one question too, and for Redora. So what about the high-density homes coming in?
The ones that are master metered are already connected to recycled water for landscape irrigation. The individually metered ones, they are now connected to recycled water.
So moving on to the first of our supply options. Option 2 is what we have for both the indirect and direct potable reuse. And so we broke it into an A, B, and C option, so I'll explain each of those as we go. So option 2A was looking at indirect potable reuse, where we take treated recycled water and we inject it into the groundwater basin. And so in this case, this is being governed by existing regulations that the state passed last year, so this is allowable. And under this scenario, we assume that we would take flow from your secondary treatment plant, put it through a full advanced treatment plant, which is microfiltration, MF, reverse osmosis, RO, and AOP, which is advanced oxidation process. You have a brine stream that would still go out the lavma outfall, and you would have your highly treated water, which would be sent to an injection well, and would have to have a 2 to 4 month travel time within the basin before it reached an extraction well. And this requires zero blending water when you have that full advanced treatment process. Yes.
Did you look at where we originally proposed the injection well to see if it met the criteria in?
We didn't because we don't have the availability of the groundwater modeling from Zone 7. We did interface with them and talk to them about that. They are planning on looking at that, and they're looking for us to provide some of our information from this study in order for them to actually do that modeling, but we don't have that.
Virginia, if I could interject, because there were a lot of questions to Redora about this development, that development, and we'd be glad to engage you and answer all those questions, but the purpose of this study was really to be at a very high conceptual level. And if these things start making sense from a policy level, decision, then we'll come down to a lower level and start getting on the ground where some of these facilities are. So we can answer some of the questions, but I don't want you to think that the study is purposely or is incomplete. It's purposely at this high policy.
No, I didn't mean to infer that it was incomplete. I'm just curious about what we already done.
So what we did do was look at using the available DSRSD flows that are typically sent to LAVMA for discharge. And so this is the sort of the shoulder part of the year when you guys, the irrigation demands are lower and you have unused recycled water that right now is being discharged out in the outfall. So this adds up to about 3,500 acre feet per year. And through the treatment process and through the groundwater injection, there's a few losses. So I'll show you what the yield actually is from that. So we assumed an advanced water treatment facility would be constructed at the site of your existing wastewater treatment plant. And we assumed separate injection and recovery wells, so just to make sure we had all of the facilities covered. And we assumed that 90% of what you injected would be retrievable, so there's a little bit of a loss to the basin in that assumption. So this yield, the yield ends up being around 2,800 acre feet per year from that 3,500 acre feet. Capital cost is somewhere in the $50 to $70 million range, which works out to about $2,000 to $2,200 an acre foot. This might be a little on the high side. We're trying to be conservative for you guys in the cost and what we're presenting today. And these all assume that there's no outside funding or cost sharing. You know, through the Prop 1 water bond that was passed this past fall, there's a lot of opportunities for grants and loans and other ways to reduce some of these costs. But for the purposes of this presentation and this analysis, we assume no outside funding or cost sharing on this facility.
If I could interject on that, we asked RMC specifically to focus this on a DSRSD alone kind of analysis, just to make sure we're comparing apples to apples as we go through each one of these alternatives. We fully understand that many of these options can't be implemented on our own, that there would be partnerships to implement it that would be necessary. But to just sort of, you know, keep everything on an apple-to-apple basis. We said, let's look for the box around DSRSD and look at the costs and what it does for reliability, et cetera, and just DSRSD.
Does the capital cost include or exclude what we've already got?
This is the cost of all new facilities. So we don't, and that's pretty typical in recycled water systems. You don't necessarily start attributing the primary and secondary part of the treatment process to the cost of the water produced. So option 2B is similar in concept. It's still called indirect potable reuse, and this is taking treated recycled water and bringing it to a reservoir for augmentation. So instead of putting it to the groundwater basin for storage, you put it to the reservoir for storage. This is not quite yet covered by state regulations. They're in development and they are supposed to be finished in 2016. So we have a blend water assumption of to be determined, just to be clear that that's not a set number by any regulations or guidelines yet. But it's the same treatment process, same full advanced treatment, still have a brine stream going out the LAVMA outfall. We can send it to a reservoir and then that can be pulled out and used for local uses. So it becomes sort of a raw water supply into the reservoir. So same flow assumption, same DSRSD flows, captured in the shoulder time, same treatment facility. We made some assumptions about constructing a pipeline either to Lake Del Valle or to San Antonio Reservoir. The water in this case becomes part of the Zone 7 or PUC supplies, the folks that manage those reservoirs primarily. So you would need to, this would definitely be some kind of partnership where you have to figure out how you then redistribute that supply that you contributed into the reservoir back to DSRSD. So the yield is the same. We assumed a little bit of loss in the reservoir, and there's two example pipeline alignments that we looked at going either to San Antonio or to Lake Del Valle. Capital cost is higher primarily because of the pipeline facilities, closer to the $100 million range. And so the cost per acre foot also goes up as well. And we did make a note here that this does not include any cost for nitrification or denitrification prior to that advanced treatment process. Those nutrients may be required to be removed since this is going into a reservoir. And that's something that may need to happen as part of any upgrades to future NPDES permit compliance. Nutrients are a big issue right now in the Bay Area for bay dischargers. So we didn't include any of those costs specifically to this alternative, but that could be something that happens, regardless of whether this moves forward or not. Any questions on reservoir augmentation? And as Randy mentioned, so option 2C is what's called direct potable reuse. This is definitely a much further down the line option and not currently covered by any regulations in the state, but we're hopeful eventually. We assume the same treatment train, although we do have a bit of a box there. We assume there needs to be some kind of storage between when the recycled water is produced and when it gets put into your potable water distribution system. So we at least need some kind of engineered storage. We also have a question mark there for any additional treatment that may come out of any future regulations, but that's a bit unknown at this point. The purpose of the storage in this case is to provide a health and safety buffer. If you find out something's gone wrong with your treatment process, you don't want to already be sending that advanced treated recycled water out to your potable customers. So, and we assume that this would be distributed through your existing DSRSD system, treated like a potable water supply, not a raw water supply. So same yield. Capital costs go back down closer to what the IPR with groundwater recharge costs are because you don't have that extensive pipeline system. And so the unit cost goes down as well. This is just a little bit on the far end of where the industry's headed at this point. Any questions about direct potable reuse?
Mr. Farnan?
I don't know. Randy, do you have any thoughts on where the state is with direct potable reuse?
The schedule now is in 2016, there will be a feasibility study presented, and that's got a lot of review by outside panels and that kind of thing. Like I said earlier, there's several agencies that are really looking at this seriously, including the city of LA. So my prediction is by 2018 we'll have regulations for direct potable reuse, that time frame.
And storage for this, is this like a big surface water reservoir or just a big tank?
Well, we're assuming a big tank
All right.
of some sort. And one of the approaches taken by the city of Los Angeles is to get water treated with this advanced treatment train categorized as a raw water source for potable purposes, and basically have that water go right into a water treatment plant and then into the public distribution system. So we'll see how the regulations turn out. But the fact of the matter is we're cutting down on a lot of infrastructure with this alternative. We don't have the pipelines going out to reservoirs, we don't have injection wells, all that kind of thing, so the costs do go down.
I have a quick question too, is offset, that because we're not pushing some of that water over the hill, and that will also be reduction for us on the
Right.
Laguna side,
That's correct.
That's a great point.
which could benefit the
Yeah.
whole, the region as well.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, there's the reduced cost for you for pumping through the lava system as well as, EBDA outfall has some capacity issues and you guys could be helpful in reducing those as well.
I have a question. I'm sorry, back on 2B. Can I assume that the reason you didn't look at the channel lakes is that they're possibly not going to be available until 2053 or something like that?
Yeah, that's correct.
The other thing you have to realize with the Channel Lakes, it's really not truly a reservoir augmentation system. Channel Lakes is the groundwater.
Yeah.
So you could say Channel Lakes is in to the bay.
Yeah, instead of injection wells, you could.
So one last 2B question. Water going into Bell Val, it's pretty easy to conceptualize how we get it back. I assume water going into SFPUC, WS is it a wheeling deal or so we need two pipes then?
Well, possibly. There's other ways to get water into the system. The HFG aqueduct, it can be put into the groundwater basin upstream or up in the metro area or whatever.
That's true.
There's different ways to get water into the overall, Tri-Valley system.
But it's definitely a partnership strategy. There'd be
yeah.
no way to get the water back just
Well, absolutely, and Del Val is as well, in addition to Zone 7, the downstream users are Alameda County Water District, Santa Clara Valley Water District, they don't have to be part of this type of.
And the Fed zone part of that too.
Yeah, well, the state Department of Water Resources. But the downstream potential partners, Alameda County Water District and Santa Clara Valley Water District are both actively looking at or thinking about looking at these kind of options with recycled water providing a portable supply.
This is just the summary on the IPR and DPR options. So again, around 2,800 acre feet per year. We're assuming reliability is 100%. You know, essentially, it's there, you treat it, you deliver it. You know, the system, the treatment facilities could be down for a day or two, but you know, functionally, it's 100% reliable in comparison to something like an imported water supply. And so that cost range, you know, on the low end could be as low as $1,700 an acre foot up to $3,100.
And as Bert mentioned, this is strictly the DSRSD recycled water that's available in the off-peak season. So it doesn't include Pleasanton's flow or possibly drinking water from Livermore or watersheds from Central Sand Community System or whatever. There's potential ways to expand the amount of water that can be used for this type of use.
So our third option is another water supply option. This is looking at Bay desal. We made assumptions that we would have a desal facility located over in the Hayward area, you know, potentially co-located next to where they have the City of Hayward wastewater treatment plant as well as the Calpine Energy Generation Facility. They've kind of got a little bit of an industrial facility set up there, and there's still land available near that. And that would allow you to discharge the brine from the desal facility into the EBDA outfall, and then pipe water back over the hill to DSRSD service area.
And that second pipe.
That is definitely another cost savings option that could be on the table, is repurposing existing infrastructure.
There's a possibility of exchanges as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we start getting into levels of detail. But again, we try to keep it simple, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's still moving water.
So the yield number on this one's a little funny, and it'll make more sense when we look in the portfolio at the end, but we assumed a yield of around 4,200 acre feet per year. Capital cost is obviously much higher. This is we assume basically an ocean desal project, because we don't have information about, you know, what salinity you'd be getting through slant wells into the Bay area. So we assume 50% for every, you know, acre foot of water you took out of the Bay, you get half of an acre foot in yield to you and half of an acre foot back in brine discharge. So the capital cost is more on the $200 to $250 million range. So the acre foot cost is therefore also quite high. Again, no assumed outside funding. And again, basic, you know, 100% reliability in terms of, you know, always being able to use the facility and deliver water when you wanted it. This is another option, you know, either through exchanges and other reasons. There's other reasons why this might be a good partnership opportunity with some of the other water agencies that are on the Bay side. They might be interested in, you know, building a joint facility, something similar to the regional desal facility that's planned on the north side, maybe for the agencies that aren't involved in that region.
But these costs are over double what's being projected for the Carlsbad desal project in San Diego County. And I think, as Bert mentioned, there's a lot of ways to bring these costs down with exchanges, so you don't bring the water directly back, or other partners are involved to make the project larger and have more economies of scale, outside funding, whatever. So we're just being very conservative with the cost shown.
So you can see we have an assumption about the little purple dashed alignment coming back over the hill. Obviously that adds, you know, a pretty large component to the cost. So our fourth option was looking at north of Delta transfers. This is, as Randy explained, the concept of purchasing water north of the Delta, and we assumed wheeling through the East Bay mud system, which in this case is shown on the map in a combination of green and purple with the Freeport pipeline, the Folsom South Canal, the red line, which is the Mufalmi Aqueduct, coming down into East Bay Mud's water treatment plant in Walnut Creek. And we assume that you would then construct a pipeline down the 680 corridor, and you'd receive treated potable water from East Bay Mud to your service area. There's opportunities in this arrangement to also be able to get some storage in the Los Vaqueros system potentially. We're calling the yield on this variable because it really depends on what kind of water transfer agreement you can get with a North Delta water agency, and they can be, all over the place in terms of yield. There's also the difference between, a more permanent transfer and a spot market transfer. So we didn't want to speculate too much on this. You'll also see where this fits in our portfolio. The cost, $1,800 per acre foot. That number may be familiar to you folks in terms of your existing transfer that's happening this year. And then obviously the cost of the new conveyance pipeline down the 680 corridor. The liability on this is a little bit dependent again on what type of contract you secure. It's assumed to be better than Delta water supply liability because we sort of circumvent the Delta, and there's still more natural variation that could occur in an option like this than generating water through desal or through IPR or PPR options. So I'm going to turn it back over to Randy to present our potential portfolio, unless there's any other questions on the options.
Thank you.
This is actually the first slide that's been replaced in your packet. We retitled this to call it tentative district goals. These are the concepts that were presented at the last workshop in February. And I think your board packet calls them recommended goals, but we're coming up with some goals that are more of our recommendations. The other point to make that's different from your handout is when we're talking about reducing the potable demand. Last time we said targeting 70 gallons per capita per day, but we were referring strictly to the residential portion of your demand at that time. So that's where the 70 gallons per day came from. So at any rate, these were the ideas that we presented last time, and Bert kind of laid out these as possible goals or possible targets from a framework perspective, and looking at reducing potable demand, increasing water use, basically heading toward a zero discharge type scenario, which would have some benefits beyond the water supply created. Increasing the portfolio reliability, variability, basically improving the water supply reliability on an overall basis. Increasing local control, and of course reducing the concentration risk, reducing the amount of supply from any particular source of water. So with those kind of concepts or targets in mind, we developed a portfolio that may make some sense from a long-term perspective. We started with the recycled water and said, okay, how can we utilize every drop of recycled water produced from services in your area? And we said, okay, there's 3,500 acre feet per year from recycled water to non-potable supplies. This includes the DERWA and other recycled water uses in your service area. But then also, on top of that, go forward with the idea that Karen presented with indirect potable reuse up to about the 2,800 acre foot number. And then we started thinking about, okay, that we maximize, use every drop of recycled water that was produced, and basically going to zero discharge. And we looked at the state water project and looked at that as a source of up to 40% of your total supply. Again, going back to the framework we just talked about here, not having any one supply be more than 40% of the total portfolio. We said, okay, well, where does that get us? So we have all the recycled water is utilized. The 40% comes from the state water project. We still have a gap here to make up with some source of water. And right now, from a reliability standpoint, the desal option seems to make a lot of sense. There might be further studies that get into the transfer option that make that a little bit more attractive. But anyway, this is just an example of a portfolio that could meet your future demands and then also meet the criteria by and large that was laid out in this framework. Okay, there we go. So if we tend to look at how does this straw man portfolio, if you will, compare to your tentative goals, we would say that the potable demand of 70 gallons per capita per day for the residential community probably is a little bit lower than what you're going to want to look at from a long-term perspective. We tried to go kind of in the middle of where the lowest possible numbers have been in the past and to more reasonable numbers, I guess, of what you're really achieving at this present time. So we came up with a range of 75 to 80 gallons per capita per day for the residential portion of your demand as a target. If we went with this concept, you basically, like you said, be going to zero discharge. So we would basically be talking about 100% water recycled year round. Basically, the only flow that's going to be discharged in this portfolio would be the water that's rejected through the RO process, so brine that goes back into the lava pipeline. The reliability, even with this combination of supplies, is still not as great as what we would like it to be, or what we thought would make sense as a target last time. Primarily, it's affected by the state water project. If we just look strictly at the desalination of the recycled water portion of the supply, they're approaching 100%. So it's really the state water project portion, the 40% of the portfolio that drags the reliability down in that combination. Of course, you could always go to more desalination as a portion of your portfolio, or go to expansion of the recycled water for potable use with some outside sources of supply from other wastewater agencies, more and more to increase your recycled water production. Local control is about what the target is shown in the target goals, and the concentration risk again is limited to the 40% number. By just saying that local component of the portfolio is not going to go to 40%. And the costs by combining these various supplies are not significantly greater than where you are today from the overall projected cost standpoint. So, did you have anything to add to?
I just want to point out that the status quo costs that we calculated assumes the state water project costs with the BVPP, because that's really the fair future status quo to compare it to.
That's about what we're paying today. We're paying 1,100, right? So
CPD is very expensive.
But it's only going to be
Nobody knows.
Yeah, I was going to say that. $200 an acre foot seems extraordinarily low for what they're asking.
Well, higher costs and no increase in reliability.
Thank you.
But there's a lot of variables to this, a lot of variations to this. You can obviously go back and try and increase the state water project portion of this, or increase the desalination portion of this, or add in the transfer component.
Or more contracts with another agency for, like a little more Pleasanton Dreams and recycling water. I mean, there's just a lot of variability. So we're just trying to illustrate that this portfolio is pretty close to that kind of policy framework we just kind of thought about last time. There are obviously a number of variations.
And given the regulations that are going to be approved here in the next couple of years, that will change a lot. That will change these metrics.
So, I mean, obviously, we'd like to hear your thoughts on this, but let me just try to say where we're probably heading. I mean, we'll finish up based on your vote, we'll finish up the report, present it to you again. But ultimately, I think what we're going to be asking the board to do is consider a policy that's kind of in line with those district goals, or word it more carefully in policy format. And then that really becomes a roadmap to make the decision to go forward. Different options we look at to conform to those policies. Maybe one way of saying it is we did this study to convince ourselves that there is a physical solution out there that can conform to those policy requirements. And, we think there is.
Any questions for the session?
And
Yeah, I like that.
the portfolio slide's probably the best one to have up, at least for my purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, very, very neat work. Thank you very much. This gives us a lot to think about. So I like to play well with others, but my bias during this analysis is to focus on, or at least keep on the table, things that we can control.
Yeah.
Direct total reuse is really intriguing, especially if LA is behind it and they have very deep pockets and
Sure.
they will get what they want eventually. So I like the indirect scares me just because we've been down the groundwater injection game, and that's a rattle that I personally don't want to head down again. And then the reservoirs, then we have to bring a lot of other people
Sure.
into it. So I like to keep DPR on
Right.
in the analysis.
The indirect, though, it's amazing at how much publicity it's getting right now. Even people in Pleasanton wants to do it, which, as you well know, 15 years ago, they would have died first.
And that may be the answer. It's just, we dump it into the basin and we lose control of it, where,
There's a lot of history, though, with Orange County's project and other projects that have been in place for quite some time since.
That didn't help 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And we're not losing the Norfolk Delta transfer part of the analysis.
No, we're not.
Because I think something with we tried the spot market this year, and it, was kind of a painful experience, but something with the longer-term contract with a storage component, you gotta have a storage component. That way we're immunized from your 1 year of craziness. And store it north of the Delta, and then it's pretty viable, I think.
That's an interesting point. You didn't look at East Bay mud storage, which I assume, I'm not understanding.
They don't have much, do they?
Well, but we're going to look at it for this project right now.
They don't, basically their storage is limited to, you put it into storage and you have to have another storage.
All their reservoirs, that's,
They
Like,
also use
it's
a
a
little bit
yeah.
of Los Vaqueros as well.
Well, Los Vaqueros will be extended. That's one of the projects in the top one schedule. So there will be capacity to access.
I think Los Vaqueros is
And most of those provides you multi-year storage possibilities.
Don't you energize or?
Yeah, there's possibilities of direct interties, both existing as well as virtual for transfers, as well as future pipeline being planned by from use from most of the girls over to the state project tied to the east side. So, future has got a lot of.
I know it's a public meeting, so everybody knows about it, but in the spirit of what we just kind of went through, I'm assuming we've been sharing this process with our neighbors.
Yeah, and actually, invited Zone 7 and the other retailers to come see a presentation of a draft of this, kind of our dress rehearsal of it. Only Zone 7 is up on the offer. Some of the other retailers know conceptually what we're doing, but they didn't attend our presentation.
Because even if we do the analysis kind of focused on our district, I mean, all these ideas expand pretty easily to the valley.
This is kind of a base.
A few contrasts here and there, but it's not a big deal.
And you even have, to build on Pleasanton's interest in some of these ideas, even the city of Livermore is expressing interest. There's at least a couple of council members that publicly said they're very interested in indirect potable reuse. And one of the Livermore Council goals is to confirm support for indirect potable reuse. I mean, that's how they phrased it over the next 18 months. Not to say that they have done so, but their strategic plan is looking at trying to get to a point of confirming it.
That's promising. Then the food cost goes down.
That's probably one of the few benefits of the drought, is the climate.
Everybody's
Receptivity to this, any other idea is
Because I definitely Pleasanton.
been increased. Given that you can vary those sources, obviously, what kind of a time projection do you think we're looking at for desalinization as far as actually being able to deliver some water?
That's a tough question. The project in San Diego County, Carlsbad, I think probably took about 10 years to get that permitted. And another 5 years.
5 years to build.
So it's been like a 15 to 20 year program probably.
Yeah, if I could comment on desal, the desal option we took, again, we tried to get the project that was implementable, at least for purposes of this study, as a DSRSD loan project. There's other possibilities for desal. There's a Bay Area desal project. There's 6 agencies involved in looking at desal along the Pittsburgh Antioch corridor. Zone 7 is one of those agencies, so we can see the benefit of that. There's another concept that's a different concept along the Pittsburgh Antioch corridor involving the city of Antioch and Delta Diablo. People want to use the system over here, so that's another possibility. Those facilities are largely in place already, except for the actual desal facility, about 80 gigs of discharges are in place. So some of this stuff, depending on what sort of coalition you can bring together, that's some of the stuff will happen faster than others.
And I think San Diego's also paved the way for more projects now to run smoother because they've refined the permitting process. They've been out and about sharing that project with everybody.
I would say so. Yeah.
So I think like they've been the real key in the West Coast.
Well, rather than compare us to San Diego, I'd be really interested in finding out how the community service district where Bob Gresham's is by First Castle, Cambria. I'd be interested to see how they're doing.
And Santa Barbara is starting up their facility.
So it's started.
Cambria is what, 1,000 acre feet?
It's relatively small.
It's about that size,
Yeah,
yes.
because my cousin's involved in that, because he has property in Cambria, so he's been really involved in that project.
Yes.
Did you have that from us?
Very good, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And at some point, we'll have a policy document for your consideration that'll allow you to I'm sure about a lot of them. Your call, you certainly can. I
I don't know if Logan would be interested in tourism, like.
If you want us to, we can certainly do it.
Better also share it with the liaison. The liaison can do Pleasanton and very much yesterday.
You see in our packet for this special meeting that we have minutes from the previous.
Those are,
Copies attached.
Yeah.
those were,
Those are references.
Yeah.
I think they were referenced, those are already done approved. All right. Those are already done.
It's the art sign, so.
Just to joggle
The
around.
art sign.
That being the case, no further business for this special meeting, we'll adjourn the meeting. You're ready to reconvene for the regular.
so.